Hey, I'm Steve Krenz for Guitar Gathering. Thank you for joining us on this additional lesson on song arranging for guitar, creating chords that captivate. So there is a part 1 to this, and the link is going to be in the YouTube description down below, as well as the link for the PDF that we have done for this lesson. So there's a detail, I think it's 12, 13 pages of a PDF with all these examples that I'm going to get to. Now, in part 1, we talked about several different tools that I use to create interesting chord progressions from really a simple start. So we're using the song Silent Night, and we're going to do it in the key of G, which uses a G chord, a C chord, and a D, which is a 1, 4, and 5 in the key of G. To get that in your ear, take a look at page 1. We'll just review here for just a few seconds. We have the initial progression. What we're going to be talking about is the chords, the progression, and we're going to see if we can create some magic from this rather simple 1, 4, 5 progression. So it just stays on the 1 chord here on page 1. Goes to the 5 chord here. Just playing the melody just so you can hear it. 4 chord. Back to 1 chord. Then back to the 4 chord. Five chord. Quick 5 chord. Okay, so at its base, that's what it is, just 1, 4, and 5. Now, in part 1 of this lesson, we went through kind of the first 6 or 7 of these tools that I laid out for you. So the first one we talked about was using some chord inversions. So by putting some inversions, I can create a more interesting sounding progression. Remember, I can give the illusion of movement by, even when the chords aren't changing, by just changing the inversion of the chord that I'm using, putting, instead of the root in the bass, putting maybe the 3rd or the 5th in the bass. Now, in the PDF example on page 2, you'll notice I put all of the chord diagrams there, so in case there's maybe some that we run across that you're not familiar with, there you go, you've got it. The second tool we talked about was switching out relative major and relative minor chords. Remember, each chord, whether major or minor, has a flip side to it. So a major chord has a relative minor chord that goes along with it, and that's related by a 6th step. So if you're in the key of G, then the E minor would be its related minor chord. If I'm playing an E minor, I could substitute in a G. If I'm playing a G, I could substitute in an E minor. If I'm on a C, I could go up to an A minor. So each chord has this sibling that's of a different type, but they share a lot of the same notes. So a lot of times I can get some difference in the arrangement by substituting in some of these relative major and minor chords like this. This is on page 3. There's the relative minor G to E minor. Now remember we talked about how the relative major and minor switch works particularly good on the 1 and 4 chord. Here it is again, A minor. So we talked about how you can use those. You can substitute one for the other, and that will give you some more creative flexibility. On the page 4, we talked about another tool that I can use, the third tool. I can use a dominant 7th chord to resolve to a 1 chord. So remember, if I'm in the key of G, I build this dominant 7th on the 5th step of the G scale, G, A, B, C, D. I add the 7 to it, D7. So this chord works like a door to get to a G. A D7th likes to resolve to a G. A G7th, which is the 5th of a C, C, D, E, F, G. I add the 7th to that, and that becomes a G7, and that will lead me to a C. So you have these dominant 7th chords that are built on the 5th step, and they resolve to the 1. So if we started using that trick, combined with some of the others, we get on page 4, there's our relative major and minor there. Here comes the dominant 7th of the G. Hear that 7th chord right there? Now we're going to come to the C, and we're going to precede it by its dominant. There's a quick little dominant there. Hear that G7th in there? That helps me lead to the C. So I can use that trick. Inversions, relative major and minor switch. I can use dominant 7ths before certain chords, major or minor, and it will help me get to that chord. Take a look at the next one, page 5. Our 4th tool that we could use, just like we have dominant 7ths, I can even back that up further and give a 2, which is a minor chord, to the 5, and then resolve to the 1. So instead of just going 5 to 1, I'm going to go 2, 5, 1, and make the 2 a minor. So in the key of G, a 2 would be an A minor, then a D, 7th, and then the G. So now instead of walking through one thing to get to G, I can walk through 2 things and elaborate that a little bit, making it a 2 minor to a 5, 7 to a 1. So how does that sound? Well, on page 5, I got G, and I'm going to go to the 2 of the G. There's the 5 of the G. Look, I'm going to a C, so I'm going to throw a little 2, 5 in of that. Da, 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 da. Here comes a 2, 5 of a D. Da, da. So these little 2, 5s can help you add interest as well. The 5th tool we talked about is I can use a diminished chord that will resolve a half step below to the target chord, which is a half step above. So I can do that little trick when I'm going anywhere. It works before anything. So let's go back to this. I have dum. So on page 6, dum, dum, da, da. Now I'm going to eventually end up on an A minor, so I'm going to do a half step below, G sharp, and throw a diminished. Dum. Did you hear that? How that switched the sound a little bit? Da, da. Now I'm going to eventually go to an E minor, so I'm going to precede it by going a half step down to the D sharp and throw a diminished on it. Da, 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 da. Now instead of going to the G7, which I did in the previous example, now I'm going to do my little half step below the C. Da, 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 da. So hear how that sounds. So that's tool number 5. Another tool I can use is I can throw that diminished chord. These are great. Diminished are great. You can use them in a ton of different situations. Here's another one. I can use a diminished chord after the 4 chord. Okay? Now remember, with all of these things, it doesn't, just because it works sometimes doesn't mean it's going to work all the time. So you need to always let your ear be your guide. It's like seasoning a great dish if you're cooking. I don't want to put too much or it kind of spoils it. If I use it every now and then, it works. So you have to kind of season it to the taste of what you want it to do. So what if I put that diminished chord after the 4 chord? What does that sound like? Well, we get dum. This is page 7. Dum, dum, da, dum, 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 da, dum. And here comes our first 4 chord coming down. Da, dum. Here's the 4. See, da, da, sharp 4 diminished after the 4. Da, da, dum. Do you hear how that works so nicely? Dum, da, dum, 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 da, dum, dum, da, dum. And that's another trick that you can use. To just, instead of having 2 bars of a 4, I could throw another little stuff in there. Another trick I can use is I can start moving the bass line. We talked about that. And I'm going to create a line that makes sense just by moving something. I can move the bass line. I can move an inner line. I can move the entire chord. But this is all being held together by this little common thread of that line that's moving. So take a look at page 8. I'm just going to move the bass line around. And that will often lead me to chords that are a little bit out of the norm. Now, it's not always going to work, but sometimes you can get yourself into some nice musical, interesting situations by starting to move the bass line like this. Dum, da, da, dum, dum, da, dun, 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 All right, there you go. Did you hear how it just one little change there kind of gave it some different options and creative possibilities for our harmony? Just like we moved the bass line to create something interesting happen, I can also move the inner line, an inner line, okay? And that will oftentimes get me to an interesting chordal possibility. So take a look at page 9. Here I'm going to move, we have a G chord, remember that's made out of a G, B, and a D. I'm going to take that D and just start moving that around. Now, I'm not moving, in a jagged line. I'm moving, half steps up or whole steps or something that the ear can recognize the pattern. Remember, the ear loves patterns. As soon as you lock into a pattern, then the ear knows where to go, where to be expected, where to be surprised, right? So just like a good joke, you set it up and then you set it again, and so the ear recognizes the pattern, and then you give the punchline on the third time through, and that's the surprise. The ear was expecting something, but it got something else. And this what we're doing this in music. So now we're going to take this inner line. I'm going to start on that D on our G chord, the 5th step, and I'm going to start moving that up, and let's see what we can come up with there. Da 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 da. So I moved it up there. Da 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 da. Now I started moving it down. Da da da. And that led me to an interesting C minor tonality there. And then I get back to my G, da, da, and now I'm moving it back up again. Da, 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 my little diminished, da, da. Remember that was our rule a couple things back. Da, 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 E minor, relative minor there. Da, da, moving that inner line down, da, 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 da. Da, 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 D sharp diminished before this upcoming E minor. And then look what we did here. Da, 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 da. Ooh, what on earth was that? Steve, what kind of chordal magic are you playing? Well, I could explain it all to you, but basically, I'm just moving a line. I'm going to take the E of the E minor 7th and move it down in half steps. And then go to this A2 with the C sharp. So I end up with this little line. Why'd I pick that A2? Well, it just kind of worked. And I liked that. It just kind of worked. Almost serves as kind of a secondary dominant to the G coming. And then I'm going to do, let's see if we can do that descending line again on this A minor. Da, 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 da. Did you hear it? Da, 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 da. So sometimes you can get, even when you're on a static chord, you can just start moving one line and start weaving it, slithering it around in there, and you'll end up with some wonderful creative ideas. Isn't that fun how you could do that with music? It doesn't always have to be G, C. You can start to play with these little things and make them, mold them, and move them into different things. Let me just play it without one time just so you can get it. Da, 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 da. some wonderful things. So we can move the bass line. We can move an inner line. All right, take a look at the next page. What else can we do? I can move the chords up and down. Now again, remember what the purpose is. The ear likes patterns. So if the ear can sense a pattern developing, it locks into that and loves that. So take a look at what's happening here on page 10. Now I'm going to move all the chords up and down and see how that sounds. And we'll throw a few other tricks in there. So you'll notice we've got multiple tricks happening here at different times. So look what we have here on the verse. We've got the chords moving up. Dum, da, da, dum, dum, da, da. The chords are just moved. The whole chord is moving up. And you see how that got me to an interesting place with that B minor. So dum, da, da, dum, da, 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 da. What happened there? Well, you can think of the B minor as just a raising of the chord, but you can also think of it as I'm heading to an A minor there in the fifth bar, and this is going to be a 2-5-1 going to the A minor. Da 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 5 of the A minor. Da. Let's go move up the chords again. Da 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 da. Oh, that took us to a really interesting place there by moving those chords up. A minor, B minor, now to a C. Da da. Another good way to move these chords is just to do a simple walk up. Da da. As a whole chord walk up. Da 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 da. Let's do that walk up again. Sounds good. Da 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 da. Oh, whoa, ho, 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 ho! What on earth is happening there? A lot of times you just can't look at it as just as itself. What is an F sharp 7 flat 9 doing in that place? You can't make sense of it until you look at where it's going. Remember, chords are like a river. You can't do it in one point in time. It doesn't always solve itself like that. Sometimes you don't know what a chord is until you start looking of where it's going to. So that F sharp 7 is going to a B minor 7th, flat 5. Well, what's that B minor 7 flat 5 doing there? That is a 2 of the upcoming A minor at the end of that bar. And so we have the E7 in between them. So that B minor 7 flat 5 and then this E7 is working as a 2-5 of the upcoming A minor. And then I backed it up even further and I gave the 5, that F sharp, of the B. So I gave the 5 of the B minor. And then I did my 2-5-1 to the A minor. So let's see how that sounds. Da, 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 da. Walk up, da, da. Oh, beautiful. It just kind of took us some different places. Dum, da, 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 da. Little 2-5 of this E minor. Hey, let's use the walk down we did from the previous version. Da, da. Let's do a long walk up. Now listen to this. Da, 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 da. Oh. Come on, what on earth is that? These are these walk-ups. The ear likes patterns. So instead of just going da, da, A minor to a D to a G, 2-5-1, I walked up that A, B minor, C sharp. Where'd that C sharp minor 7 flat 5 come from? Oh, I thought it sounded good. I could have done C, da, 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 da. But I thought the C sharp kind of gave it a nice little pull up there. Da, 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 da. Hey, I wonder if I could put a C sharp diminished in there, because that is a half step below the D. Da, 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 da. That works just as well. Do you see how there's not one right answer? I'm taking these Legos out and I'm putting them in different places and they work just as well. Da, 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 da. And I just continue walking up. So the bass line is da, 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 da. Oh, okay, so that one had some good ones. Let's play that one again. And hear these chords going up and how that changes the tonality. Dun, da, dun, dun. Da, da, dun, dun. Da, da, dun. Da, 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 da. Oh man! All right, so we have come a long way, kids, from that very first version where we're doing 1, 4, and 5. I'm sure you're starting to see that there's a lot of possibilities that can happen here. There's a lot of things that we can do. It almost seems like I could get away with pretty much anything. That's where the season to taste part comes in. You could justify a whole bunch of craziness, but it's whether it's going to work in that specific example. If I'm in certain situations, I may not want it to be really complex. If I'm playing at a jazz club, then yeah, I'll throw all of this stuff in. If I'm doing this for the candlelight service at your church, I'm going to stick pretty close to 1, 4, and 5 on that one and not throw in extra chords. Take a look at the next page, page 11. I just lumped all these together, grouped them all together, and I called it Other Possibilities. All right, so we're going to talk about a bunch of things. 3 things in particular. We're going to talk about backdoor dominance, 2s and 5s of backdoor dominance. We're going to talk about another concept called deceptive cadences. Cadences that don't go where you think they would be expecting. And the last thing I'm going to try and throw in is a tritone chord substitution. All right, these are all huge concepts, and I'm doing them in a sentence. It's laughable to think, it would take 3 lessons of 3 hours of theory to get you into some of these, but basically I've boiled it down into one sentence, so you don't have to understand all of the theory behind it. Just know how to use it. I don't need to understand all of the theory behind torque and all that sort of stuff to know what a screwdriver is supposed to do. So, and tension and all that sort of stuff. I don't need to know all that. I just need to know I can do this in that situation and it works. Okay, so that's what I want you to learn out of this. First thing we're going to talk about is backdoor dominance. Remember a dominant chord, if I'm in the key of G, the dominant chord would be built on the 5th step and we add a 7th to it, a D7. So a D7 will go to a G, that we call that a dominant 7th, built on the 5th step. Okay, so now I'm going to show you an alternate dominant. An alternate way that I can get to that G. A backdoor dominant, we call it in the biz. So I can use a D7th to get to a G, but now I'm going to show you another option to get to a G. Here's another 7th chord that I can use to resolve to a G. It's not a D7, it's a whole step down from the G. A F7. So what I'm saying to you is that a F7 can lead to a G. That's called a backdoor dominant resolution. Not a D7 to a C, a 5 to a 1, but a flatted 7th with a 7 to a 1. So instead of in the key of G, here's the D7, 5, 1. Sounds great. But what I'm also saying is that you could hear also sometimes a flatted 7th going to 1 down. Sometimes they'll even throw that flatted 5 note in there. Ooh, Steve, that almost sounds wrong. Why would anybody use that? Hey, does this sound familiar? One, backdoor dominant, the flatted 5th. Okay, so you hear this in a lot of times used in R&B. You'll hear it in Stevie Wonder songs. You'll hear it quite a bit there. And now you can use this technique too. So don't have to worry about all the theory of it. Just realize that I can go a whole step down from my target chord and play it as a 7th. If I'm in the key of G, I would play an F7, and that will lead me to a G chord. Let's say I'm trying to go to a C chord. Well, what would the backdoor dominant be of that? A B flat 7. I go a whole step down, B flat, add the 7 to it. B flat 7 will resolve to a C. Don't understand all the theory about it? Don't care. Just run it, go a whole step down, put a 7th on it, and that's kind of a hip, cool R&B way to get you to resolve to the chord. Now, just like I'm assuming that new backdoor dominant is a new altered 5 going to this one, I can also back that up and do an altered 2 going to an altered 5 and then resolve to this. So what would that be? So if I'm in G, the backdoor dominant would be an F7. What would the 2 be? That would be like a C minor. Resolving a backdoor 2-5, C minor, 7th to an F7 to a G. Isn't that an interesting sound? So take a look at page 12, and we start off with our chord dum, da, dun, dum. There's the F13th there, that F7. I could do an F7 flat 5. Dun, da, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, but it switches. In the 3rd bar, it goes to the E minor. Remember, that's just a relative minor. So I have this dum, da, dun, dum, dun, da, dun. I kind of like that bass line going down there. What if I went down another one and did an E flat? And I made kind of a C minor 6 with an E flat in the bass. So we end up with dum, da, dun, dum, dun, da, dun, dun. You see how it just pulls and tugs the harmony different directions. What do we have next? We have an A minor, dum, dun, dun. Okay, so that the A minor would be like a 2 in the key of G, and I would be expecting a 5, the D7, but I didn't get that. I've got an F sharp diminished, but that's okay. That's the half step below the G that we're expecting. Oh, but look in measure 7. It doesn't give me the G. It does the old switcheroo. It got me all excited about giving me a 2-5 to a G, and then just at the last minute, it switched out and it gave me an E minor. That is called in the biz a deceptive cadence. A cadence is, like a 5-7 to 1. 2-5-1. That's a cadence, okay? But this is a deceptive cadence. It gives me the setup, but then it switches it around at the last moment. So in this case, I've got an A minor 7th to an F sharp diminished. I'm fully expecting a G, but it gives me the relative minor. And you see how that wonderfully switches things around. It's a surprise, and the ear likes being surprised once they expect something. Let me play those first few bars again. Dum. Da dun 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 da dun dun da da dun da da dum. All right, what's happening here? Well, let's do a little 2-5 going to the C. That would makes sense. Da 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 D minor, G7, C. But now wait a minute. It didn't go to a G7. It did something else. It substituted something else in there for that 5. A 5 chord, kids. You can do all kinds of craziness on a 5 chord. It's just a chord that's built for tension. And I can make it all kinds of tense in all kinds of crazy ways. So I can do all of the fun things in life on a 5 chord. So listen to this. We start at the beginning. Dum, da, dun, dum, backdoor dominant. Da, relative minor, da, dun, da, just keeping the bass line going. 2, dum, da, F sharp diminished, da, half step below, deceptive cadence, dum, dun, dun. I threw a little D flat major 7th in there before that C major 7th. Why does it work? I don't know. I mean, if you want to go deep in this, it's called modal interchange. In about 2 hours, I can explain it to you. Or actually, you can go on to a line. It's called modal interchange. Look at the best way to explain it is by a guy. I believe it's called Miles Yang. Is the YouTube video. I'll try and link it in the thing below. And it is the best explanation I've ever seen of the concept of modal interchange, of which that's the theory behind why that D flat major 7th works. I just like it's a half step above the root. Dum, dum, da, dum. That's the sharp 4 diminished. Da, da, dum, da, dum, dum. All right, what is that? All right, kids, here it is. You've been asking about it. I've explained it a bunch of times. But here you go again. This is called, I was expecting a G7th, which would have been the 5 going to that C. But it didn't give me a G7. It gave me some other substitution for a G7. And it substituted a different chord in there, a D flat 7. Why would that D flat 7 work as a substitution for a G. All right, here it is. Here's the deal. I don't have to explain all the theory for you. Here's how it works. What am I expecting? A G7. I go 3 whole steps up from a G7. G to A to B, B to C sharp, or D flat. Okay? 1, 2, 3. 3 whole steps. The tritone. Okay? So that relationship between a G and a D flat, and a D flat to a G, it's an equal part between going up and going down. So it's the exact midway point between an octave is this interval called a tritone. All right, it's a very tense interval. And what I'm saying is that you can go to the tritone of the G, which would be a D flat, and make it a 7, D flat 7. Maybe you can throw the flat 5th in there if you want to. And that will resolve to a C. Now, I don't think of it that way at all. I think of it as I go a half step before my target chord above, throw the 7th flat 5 on it, and it will resolve to a C. If I'm trying to go to, let's say, an F chord, I would play a G flat, half step above, play a dominant 7 with a flat 5, G flat 7, flat 5, and that will resolve really nicely to an F major. All right, so that's a flat 5 or a tritone substitution there. Woo! Start again. Dum, da, dum, dum, back to dominant. Dum, da, dum, 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 da, deceptive cadence here. Dum, da, dum, dum, da, da, dun, 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 da, dun, dun. Tritone sub. Da, 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 da. What's that? F7 flat 5? That's a backdoor dominant again. Da, da. What is that? That would be like the 2 of the upcoming E minor in the, what is that, measure 11 or measure 19? We have an E minor coming. So remember 2s, when I'm resolving to a minor chord, you can sometimes add the minor 7 flat 5. Da, 2, da, da, B7, 5 of the E minor, da, da, E minor. What on earth is that? That's an E flat augmented, sharp 5, sharp 9. Why is that? Okay, this is another one. This is kind of a catch-all. Surprises. It's just a chord I thought worked, and it's a surprise. So I was expecting something, and I got another little thing in there. I can't explain everything theoretically. Oh, probably somebody could. But I just thought it was a cool sounding chord. There you go. Da, two, da, da. Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to a 5, but I'm going to do a little backdoor 2-5. Da, 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 da. Oh, did you hear that? So instead of going A minor 7, da, D7, G, I went A minor 7th to C minor 9th. I did the 9th in there. Da, 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 da. Woo! All right. We just sped our way through some major music theory concepts there. I hope you have enjoyed learning those, and hopefully you've learned some new chords along the way. Maybe we'll kind of delve into this a little bit further and see if we can get a little bit more in depth about it. But I just want you to understand how these tools are working. Hey, I'm Steve Krenz for Guitar Gathering. Keep up the great work, and we will see you guys next time.